All right, folks, midterm elections are next year, and Democrats are facing a tough road in terms of trying to retain the House, as well as build on the majority in the Senate. It's a major problem that they are facing, and the person who is going to be leading them in this effort is Jaime Harrison from South Carolina, who is the chair of the Democratic National Committee. Today, we have an opportunity to sit down and talk about a variety of issues, including what will Dems do to ensure that they are speaking to the issues and passing meaningful legislation that appeals to African Americans. Here's our conversation. All right, Jaime, want to get right to it. Lots of stuff I want to cover, and so let's dive headlong into this whole deal. When you look at what's happening right now in the country, it's really the tale of two stories. You have, on one hand, those who are claiming the country is going in the wrong direction. You look at the polling numbers of President Joe Biden, the polling numbers of Vice President Kamala Harris. Folks are talking about supply chain. They're talking about gas prices and inflation. On the other hand, you have unemployment numbers that are down. You've had 3 consecutive months of positive job numbers. Actually, they've been adjusted upward as well. You now see the Walmart CEO praising the administration for getting to the heart of the supply chain issues. How do you deal with these two different views? How do you deal with the messaging of what Democrats have done for the economy, whereas it's not catching or gaining a foothold with the public?
Yeah. Well, Roland, listen, we're in a complex time right now. We're still dealing with COVID in so many places. You know, you got the tale of two cities type scenario in some of these states. You got some states that have controlled COVID and some states who still haven't. And so you're seeing various, worlds and atmospheres in various states. What's important is this. I think is multiple steps that the Democratic Party has to take, led by Joe Biden, is to make sure that people understand what we have delivered for them thus far, what we are continuing to work on in order to deliver, and that we are not tone deaf to understand that there's still people in this country that are still going through things and they still need more help. And then it's also important, not just talking about us and what we control in the Democratic Party, but it's also equally important to paint the contrast. What is the other side actually doing, if they're doing anything at all, which they aren't? You know, they're just voting no, they're trying to obstruct, they're trying to gum up the works, they're talking down the economy instead of trying to lift up the economy and the American people. So it's really important. And so we have taken some concrete steps in delivering for the American people, because I believe ultimately, as we go into 2022, the message has to be about Democrats delivering for folks. In the American Rescue Plan was our down payment on doing that. Now we passed a bipartisan infrastructure law. Next is the Build Back Better agenda. And the crown and glory in all of this stuff, and something that we have to throw everything that we have into, is making sure that we secure voting rights for all Americans. Those are the components that I believe that will really give us the strength to go into 2022 and buck history and win in these midterm elections.
One of the things that when we talk about the narrative and also explaining these things, David Axelrod tweeted this, and look, I agree with him to some extent on several things. He said, D should stop referring to the BBB as huge, historic, and transformative, emphasizing instead how it is responsive to some of the everyday challenges people are facing, practical answers to real life problems like the cost of childcare. No one's asking to be transformed. You know, one of the things that Joe Madison always says is you got to put it where the goats can get it. And that is walking people through. Many people on the media side often focus on the cost of the package as opposed to what's in the package. What is your plan to explain that, to break that down, to walk people through, where it's no longer just 1.2 trillion, 1.2 trillion, 1.2 trillion, but literally, no, this is exactly what it is and how it's specifically going to help you in your state, in your city, in your neighborhood?
Well, listen, Roland, one of the things that I think is really important is not for people just to hear me say that or to hear the president say that. It's actually to hear real people talk about the impact that these laws have on their lives. And so one of the things that we're working on right now is the capturing of the stories from real Americans who've been impacted in a transformative way in terms of their own lives, how it's made it better for them, in terms of putting food on the table, getting Christmas gifts for their families. All of these ways that has had a positive impact for them and their families and their communities. And it's those stories that have to be shared. Because in the end of the day, another politician, another political person talking about things and this and that, that isn't how you persuade people. When they see somebody that looks like them, somebody that comes from similar background or community, somebody that they can relate to, it's a much more powerful way to sell what we've been able to accomplish right now. So we're working on all of that, and that will be rolled out. One of the things I've been telling folks is this isn't going to be a 1 or 2 week thing where you go up and you sell and say, hey, look at what we do. This has to be a 6, 7, 8 month engagement where we are breaking this thing up into pieces and making sure that we get the message out in all types of forms with all types of messengers, so that depending on who you are, you find someone who you connect with and that you hear.
I totally get that, but you also got to take credit. And the reality is Republicans are very good at taking credit. You even got some Republicans right now who voted against the infrastructure bill, who are literally lauding what's in it.
And we call them out on it every time.
Well, look, that's absolutely important. But one of the things also I think is important, and look, I said this to President Obama when they passed the Affordable Care Act. I also believe you got to take the fight to red states, to places where these people who are attacking this administration. And so my whole deal is, okay, you got that Alabama congressman who's taking credit for it. You know what? That's where you actually go to that particular city. You go to his district and you say, Democrats made this impossible and he voted against it. To me, you also take the fight and going to Mississippi, going to Alabama, going to Tennessee, Arkansas, going to these southern states, going to Iowa, going to these places where they voted for Trump and didn't vote for Biden, and say, this is how we made your life better. This is how we delivered. And so are there any plans to do that as well by going on the offense in the places where the people who are fighting you the most?
Well, we are already going on the offense in some of those areas, Roland. We have equipped all of our state parties with information specifically about how this impacts their communities. I'm also on a tour where I'm going to, by the end of, at least by first part of December, we'll have hit all 50 states in terms of going on local TV in all of these states, talking about this agenda and this law and the impact that it's going to have. I probably have done almost 7 or 8 thus far, and we're going to do more after the holidays, where we're just hitting it everywhere. And we're going to make sure that these people understand. We're also talking to our state parties about development of truth squads. So when these groundbreakings happen, when the ribbon cuttings happen and all these other things, and the Republicans try to come out and say, oh, yeah, this is such a good thing, and I'm here to help cut the ribbon. You didn't help pay for this. You didn't help. In the end, you didn't vote for it. So why should you take credit for it? That's going to be very important. We did not see that during the recovery, the stimulus plan during the Obama years, but you will see this when we roll out all of these initiatives under Joe Biden.
Will the vice president go to these places? Because obviously when they come, it raises the stakes as well. Because it's not just a matter of appealing to your core voters. It's also saying to those people who are your biggest critics, you say we're not doing anything. This. You mentioned that stimulus bill. The reality is Elkhart, Indiana had a whole bunch of stuff that got rebuilt because of that. The Obama folks, frankly, didn't take enough credit. The president did go there when they announced it. Well, that's one of those things where again, taking credit. Look, Trump, for all of his craziness, and Republicans, they took credit for a whole bunch of stuff, even for bills they never signed, because they were just driving into the public's mind of what we accomplished, and they benefited from, frankly, lying.
Well, and you're spot on, Roland. One of the things that you will see in the course of the next few days, once we come out of the holidays, president, the vice president, and the cabinet members will all be crisscrossing over the country. In addition, many members of the House of Representatives on the Democratic side have already announced over 1,000 town hall events or events to sell this agenda. So nobody's going to allow grass to grow under their feet on this in terms of making sure that people are well aware of who delivered broadband to rural communities. Now, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. I live in a state where 38% of rural South Carolina doesn't have any access to broadband. And I know personally that but for Jim Clyburn being insistent on this to make sure that we had broadband, and that's going to impact all across the country. But we got to sell it. We got to let people know who is responsible and who voted no. Those two things have to go together. And so you're going to see so much activity with Democrats across the country over the next few months and weeks. But you're also going to see the juxtapose of signs and billboards and digital ads letting people know who actually voted against this legislation that will impact their lives.
The reality is, and I hear this a lot, what have the Democrats done for African Americans? The George Floyd Justice Act, nothing happened there. When you talk about the voting bills, didn't happen there as well. And so what is going to be the narrative? What are you going to say to African Americans? Because I can tell you every single day in our chat rooms when we're live, I hear it on social media. I hear it when I travel all across this country. That is going to be an issue. What is the signature issue that you're going to be able to tell African Americans? This is what we delivered when you gave us control of the U.S. Senate, control of the U.S. House, control of the White House.
Well, Roland, I think it's clear there's so much chock full in all of these bills that have a direct impact on the African American community, that were crafted in the thoughts of the African American community. From resources that we have dedicated that have saved so many of our historically Black colleges and universities, starting in the American Rescue Plan, and will continue on in this. What we are trying to do for our students, particularly those who are attending HBCUs in terms of student loans, Pell Grants and all that coming back in the Build Back Better agenda. When you look about the impacts that disproportionately, things that impact the African American community, like the clean water and those type of things, the environmental injustices that take place in this country. A lot of provisions in some of these bills that are targeted specifically to those communities. I think about the pre-K, the universal pre-K. Those funds are primarily going to have a dramatic, disproportionate impact on Black communities and Latino communities as well. 3- and 4-year kindergarten, that's a big, big deal. The child care costs that families are going to be able to save. There's so much in these legislations, in these bills, that will have a disproportionate impact on the Black community specifically. Now, that is not to say that we still don't have a whole lot more to do. I mean, folks, we got to understand we're 10 months, 11 months into this White House and this presidency, and we have already accomplished probably more than most presidential administrations in 4 years. But we still have a lot to do with the Justice Act. We still have a lot to do with voting rights. And we all know why these things have not come to fruition. It is because of the United States Senate. It is because we still have to, instead of just getting 51 senators in order to pass something to get to the president's desk, you got to get 60. And that is the reality. Until we change that, that is going to have a hold on a lot of the things that we're trying to get done. And so that's the reality of the situation. It ain't for lack of not trying, because we passed all of these things out of the House, but we're getting stuck in the Senate right now. And our hope is to find some way to navigate around this filibuster so that we can continue to get more things done and deliver for the American people, and specifically for Black folks.
I keep getting back is, that's all great and well, but you got to get it done. Are you not concerned that by not being able to have what some are defining as a signature piece of legislation that specifically benefits African Americans, or overwhelmingly benefits African Americans, you're not going to have Black enthusiasm next year? That is of great concern. You've got Senate races happening in Florida, where you got Congresswoman Val Demings who's running. You've got Senate race in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio. That's 5 Senate races right there that are going to be critical. That has to be of concern that you're not going to have an enthusiastic black turnout. You got black activists who are saying that, look, we're on the ground and it's going to be hard for us to get people hyped and excited about the election.
Well, Roland, I've been on the ground too. You know, I've been all over this country right now, and I talk to folks all the time back home here in South Carolina. Average, everyday, hardworking black folks who just trying to make ends meet. And I can tell you, people are excited if they're getting an increase in the earned income tax credit. They're excited if just take the one provision in the Build Back Better alone, just the child care provision, where it's going to cap child care costs at 7%. If you got a single mom who is making $36,000 a year, spending $1,000 a month on childcare, that's a third of her income that goes to childcare. That will be capped in this bill. So she's not paying $12,000 a year, but she's paying $2,000 a year. That's going to be a big deal for a lot of families in this country. And the only reason why it happened is because people went out to vote last November. Now, just as quickly as it happened is just as quickly as it can disappear. We need to understand what is the contrast on the other side that we are building and trying to deliver each and every day. Are we going to get everything that we want right now? Probably not. Just doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way in life. But are we going to work like hell in order to try to do as best we can for folks, given the situation right now where we're in a 50-50 Senate? Yes, we're going to try to wring every little thing that we can out of this so that we can deliver, so that people see that this is a positive step forward. We increase our Senate majority, then we can deliver even more for them and their families and their community. We reduce that majority, and then we got to deal with the Republicans on the other side trying to take back and claw back all of the gains that we've made over the past year.
One of the other criticisms that Democrats have routinely taken African Americans for granted, not providing the resources to reach those communities. The DCCC announced today they're going to be spending $30 million targeting communities of color. What I'm getting from people is, okay, that's communities of color. What specifically is that going to go to African Americans, and what is that going to go to? Is it going to be organizations? Is it going to be on the ground? What's going to go to Black-owned media? And so when we talk about this initiative, now that's DCCC. You also have numerous other groups. You got the DNC. First of all, the DNC is separate from the DCCC. You got the DSCC, which focuses on the Senate races. The DCCC is for congressional races. You have the Democratic Governors Association. You have these other groups out here, these other PACs, and so. How are you as a Democratic chair pulling all of these different forces together saying, hey, we need to have a real massive targeted effort and spend to targeting people of color, specifically African Americans, to drive them to get out to vote?
Well, Roland, I meet with the heads of all of those organizations. Again, I only control the DNC, but I meet with the heads of all of the other sister committees on a monthly basis. Just actually had a set of meetings the other day with some of them. And I know to a group, all of them understand that we sink or swim based on what happens in terms of communities of color, and specifically in the African American community. And so I know a lot of them are investing earlier in terms of organizing on the ground. We are building out at the DNC also our efforts in doing that. All of them recognize that historically, the Democratic Party has not done what it needs to do as it relates to investing in these communities, investing in the businesses in those communities. We just held a minority diversity symposium earlier this fall, where I got all of the sister committees together in order to co-sponsor this to increase the number of minority vendors dramatically that we have in our system. So we are on the ground right now. I announced one of the first initiatives I announced was a $20 million investment in building out boots on the ground to build our infrastructure across our battleground states. And that's where we're going into these communities, picking Black and brown folks, AAPI, Native American folks, training them, and then putting them back into their communities in order to organize. And so it's a very heavy, intensive program, because we understand you can't parachute people in. You got to build up the capacity in the communities. We're going to have micro grant programs like we did last cycle, but we're increasing those so that we're investing in the the grandmas and the aunts who have their little community organizing efforts that we know, like Aunt Sally in this community, she's the one who gets out the vote. Well, she needs some grant money in order to do that. So we're going to have all of these initiatives that we're rolling out. We're starting now, but we're also rolling them out at the beginning of the year. So we're starting much earlier, but understanding that we have to invest in the communities that invest so much in us.
There have been a couple of stories talking about issues that have taken place within the DNC where you've not been able to do what you want to do. I've seen those stories. I've talked to other people as well who've expressed frustration. Are you getting the support that you need, and are you making it perfectly clear that you need to have the flexibility and the freedom and the leeway to run the DNC as you see fit? As opposed to having others, some who may be in the White House and other places, sort of dictating who you have on your leadership team and who you are working with.
Well, listen, Roland, you know how all these stories go. In the end of the day, the people back home don't care anything about who I'm working with, how I'm working with them, whatever. They just want to know whether or not we're delivering for them. And so a lot of that stuff is a bunch of hyperbole and noise. I got to focus on making sure that we build the strongest DNC possible so that we can reach out to our voters, so that we can register folks. For the first time in almost 20 some odd years, the DNC is actually back in the voter registration game. We're putting boots on the ground right now. I want to make sure that the DNC is also reflective of the diversity of our party. I've created a diversity, equity, inclusion. She's also my counsel. We're making major strides in making sure that this party looks like the folks and invest in the folks who invest in us. So that's my focus right now. I don't have time for all of the gossip in DC because people don't have anything else to do with their time.
We talked earlier about how important those voting bills are. We are seeing Republicans all across the state passing bills, gerrymandering districts, making it hard to vote as well. What is it going to take for you and others to convince your Democratic senators, especially Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, that if no action is taken, the entire party is screwed next year? I mean, one of those bills gets rid of partisan gerrymandering. The Supreme Court ruled, hey, they don't get involved in that. They leave it up to the states. But when you've already had partisan gerrymandering on the state level, then Republicans control a significant number of these state Supreme Courts. And so the reality is this, unless they do something about the filibuster to pass these voting bills, the reality is the Republicans could very well easily take over the House without any competition whatsoever, because they will gerrymander their way into controlling majority of the seats. We're already seeing it in Texas, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania. We're seeing it in numerous states.
Well, Roland, I know some of our senators want to bring civility back to Washington, D.C. Well, the one way that we bring civility back is in partisan gerrymandering. That's how you bring it back.
Well, also, incivility also means that when you're in power, you use it, because you know what? If you're the Democrats, you're going to be in the minority come 2023 if these things go through. And we're down to the wire because there's also a window here, as you well know. Yep. If you don't pass these bills, the courts may say, sorry, too late. The primaries have already started.
Well, and that's a political issue that we are facing right now. And it's important. I talked with Kyrsten Sinema just briefly at the White House signing on the infrastructure bill. It's important that we do all that we can to find a way around this. And it's just not the. Does she get it? Does she get it? Well, she heard me. And so we'll continue to have the conversations. I know that a number of folks at the White House and in the Senate and the House are also having conversations. But this is what folks need to understand. That this isn't just about whether or not Democrats win or Republicans lose or vice versa. This ultimately is about our democracy, about who we are going to be. And in the end of the day, our right to vote is the most sacred right that we have as Americans. I call it the great equalizer, because it's the same. What Jeff Bezos has a vote, and the guy who cleans up one of the factories has a vote, or one of the store warehouses, and it's the same vote. And that is the thing that makes this place so special, is that we all have that same right, regardless your background and how much money you have. And if folks want to save democracy, they want to bring civility back, we got to get this John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We got to get the other voting rights bills on the floor, voted, and to the president's desk. He's ready to sign it. We just need the Senate to act.
We've talked about in terms of what you're doing internally with the DNC when it comes to vendors. One of the issues that we have raised also, what happens in the federal government. I can tell you specifically what we have been raising with the White House from the beginning, dealing with Black-owned media contracts. The president put Susan Rice, a part of her portfolio is dealing with the issue of race equity as well. I can tell you, Jamie, when it came to the spending of COVID dollars, Black-owned media basically saw nothing. There was a study that was done 3 years ago that was initiated by Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton that showed that the federal government spent over 5 years $1 billion in advertising. Black-owned media got $51 million. This is one of those issues that African Americans, not just those of us in Black-owned media, but in other areas as well. We saw this massive bill just passed. The question I asked every cabinet secretary: how are you going to ensure that Black-owned companies are able to get a piece of those deals, be able to get those contracts? What are you saying to the White House, but also Democrats in the House and the Senate, to say y'all got to make sure that Black people who are the backbone of the Democratic Party, who drive the party, who you want votes, are participating in the economic resurgence and revival, especially when we saw 41% of Black-owned businesses go out of business during COVID?
Yeah, well, Roland, I talked about this throughout COVID, the pain that Black businesses got, the pain that many of them couldn't even get the PPP loans early on in the initial rollout, the PPP loans, because they didn't have relationships with some of the traditional banks. And so we have to understand, and I've had conversations with folks in the administration, and I know that members of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Tri-Caucus in general have had discussions about making sure that all folks, particularly communities of color, get their fair share of the proceeds that come out of this. That's really, really important. It is something that I am doing in terms of what I can control at the DNC, making sure that our vendors, we are examining across the board at the DNC every contract that we have to make sure that we are working to make sure that the communities that support us are also benefiting from the expenditures that we have as an organization. That also has to happen in the federal government. And so, I will continue to make sure to speak to all of the members of the White House and the administration to push on that, because it's the only right thing to do, and we have to do it.
And I would have just one more request, and that is when you talk about the various groups, yes, you only control the DNC. I think it would behoove Democrats, and I would love if you could call this meeting. It would be great if all these Democratic constituencies, like I say, DNC, DCCC, DSCC, Democratic Government Association, if there was a meeting with those folks where they met with our coalition of Black-owned media to ensure that resources are going to Black-owned media in the 2022 campaign season, because I can tell you with my experience in 2020, it is very difficult for a lot of our Black-owned media entities to be able to access the dollars. These let me just be very, very honest with you, these white ad agencies who control the money externally, they control these campaigns, they screw us over, they ignore us, they throw us not even pennies, it's more like half a penny. And so I think it would be great if there was a meeting in January where all these people were in the room. So you let me know. I'll bring the Black-owned media people. You bring the other people, and let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. You got my commitment. We'll get this done.
All right.
First of the year.
All right, Jaime Harrison, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too, my friend. Take care now.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's go to our panel. Lee, your thoughts on what you heard from Jaime Harrison?
Man, unfortunately, I'm a Democrat, so let me say that first. But it really just shows, man, that they really don't get it. We don't get it. Let me just include myself in terms of communicating with your constituency. Let's be real clear. Black folks showed up at the voting polls, at the ballot box. We showed up, and we have been consistently consistent supporters of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party's agenda, etc. What the Democrats, I think one of the reasons why they don't really resonate with Black folk right now, and I'm a part of a very large coalition of Black pastors here in Georgia and around the country as well, and there's general consensus that no, the White House, the president, the Democratic Party is really not coming through where we're concerned, and it's primarily because there's this thought of the rising tide lifts all boats, which is absolutely true, right? You know, when everybody's doing good, everybody's doing good. Black folk are doing good, but the challenge is this: very rarely do we see distinctive legislation that is targeted at us, Black folk, which we say are of the highest priority. A voting legislation, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, funding even in this infrastructure bill for HBCU started off at what, 45 billion?
No, that's not true. No,
no,
that story is absolutely false. We have debunked that story left and right. It did not start off at $45 billion. That was an erroneous story done by the Associated Press and done by Newsweek. We walked through the entire deal. And so there has been a dramatic increase over the last 18 months to HBCUs. And in fact, if you look at per pupil, the amount of money that HBCUs have gotten, they have gotten in terms of, on average, $25,000. In fact, some of these schools have actually gotten more money from the federal government in the last 18 months than their own states have given. Tennessee State, for example, has gotten more money from the federal government than the state of Tennessee has funded that state school. So that story is false.
Okay, I'll give you that. And I'm wrong on that. Okay, I'll give you that. You're the media. I'll give you that. But what I'm saying, my point is still there. It's still very clear that the feeling that we are getting more than talk is just challenging for me. Yeah, they know how to say the right things, right? But when it comes down to really putting their capital forward, their political capital forward, we're just not seeing it. And so it sounds good. And I'm saying I believe, generally speaking, the administration is doing good. The Build Back Better, what's in that? The infrastructure bill, the America Rescue Plan. People are benefiting in very tough times there. So I will give you that. But I'm speaking specifically where African Americans are concerned, and I'm still really challenged.
I didn't get to hear all of Brother Harrison's comments, but I'll say I think a lot of times we see the same cycle of leveraging loyalty and then a letdown on the back end, and the letdown always comes alongside reasons that we're supposed to accept that Black people are getting the short end of the stick. And again, I don't want to speak unintelligently. I had to step away for part of his comments, but I know as a lifelong Democrat, especially a Democrat in Texas, that's kind of what I always expect. I expect that the rhetoric is far going to outseed the results. And I would hope that, going forward, we see better results with the legislation that's passed and with what measurable effects we see in the lives of Black people.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. town this weekend for the Bayou Classic, broadcasting live in partnership with Coca-Cola Friday and Saturday. You do not want to miss it. So Black Star Network will be on the scene. That's right, covering the coaches' luncheon on Friday. We'll be broadcasting Friday night. Then, of course, we'll be broadcasting from the Fan Zone. There's a parade Saturday morning, broadcasting that. Plus from the Fan Zone. In addition, we'll be broadcasting the halftime. That's right, y'all. Don't worry about the rest of these folk. Don't worry about it. NBC doesn't show it. We'll be showing you the halftime show right here on the Black Star Network.